Many years ago, I reviewed the legendary all-time worst game contender Superman on the Nintendo 64. The game is infamous for making you fly through tight courses of rings with garbage controls, glitchy objectives that leave no room for error, draw distance that looks like you're flying through pea soup, and weak superpowers that require ammo before you can use them. And that's only the first level! Beat it and you're treated to indoor maze levels driven by clunky combat, puzzles that make absolutely no sense, and terrible boss fights. Oh, and it was also bugged out the ass. I played it fresh for 20 minutes to collect this footage, and I hit a bug this bad. Not to toot my own horn, but I was one of the first YouTubers to play past the first level, and it was a key series of videos that drew a lot of subscribers at the time, including some that would go on to be close friends years later. Terrible as the quality of my videos was back then, I'm still satisfied with my takedown of the game. But Superman 64 wasn't where this story ended. Titus, the game's developer and publisher, also made a Superman title for the Game Boy 2 years prior. It had basically zero of Superman's powers, recycled enemies and levels, and horridly unfair hitboxes that made it difficult to survive the game's pitiful 10 levels. It was better than their Nintendo 64 outing, but that's not saying much. But to my surprise, that still wasn't where this story ends, because the legendary bomb Superman 64 has a sequel! Or maybe you'd call it a port, I don't know, just listen. Titus wanted to release Superman 64 on the PlayStation, but after the original game became an infamous worldwide travesty, Titus realized that a straight port just wasn't an option. So Titus hired Blue Sky Software, known for the Vector Man games, to make an entirely new version for the PlayStation. Development ran into troubles. Supposedly the PlayStation has a shorter draw distance that prevented city flying, thank God. And they were forced to seriously downplay any violence, but Blue Sky persevered and had the PlayStation version not only completed, but issue an official product code from Sony. This thing was totally cleared for an official release. So what happened? Titus's Superman license had expired and they didn't get the rights back. The finished game had to go unreleased, Blue Sky Software went out of business, and the game was thought lost forever. Enter Richard Mandel, who claimed to have acquired a disc of the prototype build at an auction in 2014. Mandel demanded a ransom from some blog or archive for the game's wide release, and when nobody wanted to pay his ransom, he claimed that he had smashed the disc and all his drives and deleted the game forever. Incomplete builds surfaced here and there until 2020 when Mandel revealed that he had lied and uploaded the complete ISO of the finished game in a journal on DeviantArt. Then his crazy pills wore off again and he took the game down, but not before tons of people had made copies of the game to post to every archive that they could find. These days the finished game is pretty easy to find if you know anything about emulation, which I don't. But luckily my friend Schnick not only got me a copy of Superman PlayStation, we also got it running on the PAP-1. Yeah, you remember the PAP-1, a bootleg console that I reviewed a few years back, explicitly warns you not to leave it plugged in or else it melts? Yeah, that one. And lest you think being able to load up PlayStation games redeems the poor thing, Schnick hooked me up with some other emulations to try, and only about half of them worked. Judge Dredd and Beast Wars Transmetals both crash a few minutes in. Alien Resurrection works, but the system has no analog support, so I can't use its innovative dual-stick controls. Blade didn't load up at all, E's no good, crashes if I use any save states, and it's a good thing that Rebel Assault 2 is coming to PlayStation 4 and 5 because this PlayStation 1 emulator has no tools to swap discs. Damn cock tease. But the PAP-1 runs Pepsi Man, so all is forgiven. Pepsi Man! Right off the bat, even though this is supposedly the complete version of the game, it still doesn't seem like it was actually finished. Despite an opening cutscene with a montage of other animated sequences, there are no other cutscenes or story bits until the game's ending. I guess voice work and animation were too hard or expensive when they didn't have a guarantee that this was ever actually going to release. The game reuses not only the menu screen, but all the music, several sound effects, and the few voice clips from the Nintendo 64 version, which is incredibly surreal. Better check the options before we start. Oh no. Difficulty. The Nintendo 64 version cuts off early if you don't play it on hard. Does this one do the same thing? I can't decide. I can settle this. We're risking normal. The first level is a parking garage where you have to run around rescuing hostages and save Lois Lane, so pretty typical Tuesday for Superman. Instead of fighting dudes in black flasher jackets that you were told might kinda sorta be robots, this version just has you fighting robots, and the damage mechanic here is actually pretty unique. All of the enemies have kryptonite weapons, and there are giant kryptonite energy balls floating through the levels. Get hit once, and you're poisoned. While poisoned, you have a health bar, your punches do half damage, and you can't use any of Superman's powers. However, if you survive long enough for the poisoning to wear off, the health bar disappears and instantly refills, so as long as you last long enough to shake off the kryptonite, you'll never die. It's not a bad idea for a Superman game, except it means that you'll spend a lot of time waiting for the poisoning to wear off because you need your powers to do all of the objectives. And yeah, this shit gets old fast. X punches, circle whirls around 180 degrees, triangle cycles through your superpowers, and square uses your powers. Wait, what? You have access to all of Superman's powers right off the bat and they don't run on energy? What madness is this? It's almost like Blue Sky was making an actual Superman game! Ice Breath freezes and weakens enemies, and you use it to embrittle lots of objectives to smash them. Heat Vision kills enemies, really slowly with concentrated fire and awkward slow aiming, and X-Ray Vision lets you see through smashable objects, which you'll almost never need to do. Yeah, Freeze Breath is the only power that you'll use through most of the game, since trying to land hits with Heat Vision barely works without getting shot. You're going to run up and punch most of your enemies to death, which is just as clunky and tedious as it sounds. The game runs on tank controls even while flying, by the way, so get used to awkward and stiff controls for absolutely everything that you try to do. So this first level, you run around, fight robots, dodge Grinch nards, and use your freezing breath to break shield projectors so that you can rescue hostages. Some of the hostages need a medical kit before you can rescue them, and once you rescue someone, they drop a key for the door to Lois. And here's a slight problem that becomes a massive pain in your ass. Superman can only carry one item at a time. And yes, the keys count. So this level turns into Backtrack-a-palooza as you go to the next hostage, track down a med kit, take it to the hostage, get a key, take it to the door at the end, and then backtrack to another hostage to find out if you need to backtrack to another med kit before you can go back to the hostage and get the next key! Superman badly needs to learn from his pal Batman. Get a utility belt so that you can carry shit! And yeah, Superman's movement speed is not very fast, so this gets tedious real quickly. You can fly anytime using the shoulder buttons to ascend or descend on command, but flight doesn't make you any faster. But hold on, doesn't Superman have super speed? Shouldn't that be one of the powers that you can cycle through? Well, it is, except super speed doesn't actually do anything. Trying to use the power just has Superman march forward at walking speed, damaging enemies. It gets used like once all game, and otherwise does nothing but clog up the inventory. Seriously, what the hell? After you finally shuffle around the last of the items, you get to Lois, who... Is it just me, or does she barely look a thing like Lois Lane? The hair's the wrong color, the eyes are wrong, and she doesn't have a back! And now you have to carry Lois to the exit through Grinch balls and newly spawned enemies, because if she takes one single hit on the way out, it's a game over, and you have to redo Clark's delivery service all over again. The worst part is when you have to hide in little side rooms to slip past the balls. The camera won't turn to show you the instantly lethal hazards, and you can die on the spot because Lois's foot just barely grazed something off screen. It's happened to me before, and it's agonizing. The game's first boss is Metallo, who attacks you while you run around disarming bombs by exploding them with your freezing breath. Disarming the bombs isn't so hard, but Metallo can be a dickhead. If he hits you once, you get poisoned, but at least he knocks you away so that you can start running and avoid further damage. But if he gets you a second time, he won't stop punching until you are dead at his feet. Okay, so simple enough. Run away from Metallo and only fight him when you're not poisoned. Great plan! Except the game's got collision problems out the wazoo. If you go in to punch Metallo, or if he happens to knock you into a nearby wall, it is extremely possible for you to get stuck, since the game treats bosses as immovable obstacles that you can't move around. For all intents and purposes, Metallo is able to climb inside your hitbox, make the game think you're stuck in a wall, and pummel you to death while you're frozen solid. It is a titanic pain in the ass. And yes, the game has dodge moves built into the shoulder buttons. No, they don't really help you avoid metal nards here. Especially not when he backs you into a corner to where even if you could move, there's nowhere to run! I am fully convinced that the game's turnaround button was invented solely for this one boss fight to nail Metallo while running, because I never used that button again. Next, the game sends you to a mine to rescue some workers from spider robots. Spider robots that just kind of sit near the ceiling doing nothing, but you still have to fly up and kill them on a time limit or else the workers refuse to be rescued. Some of the workers are encased in webs, and my first thought was to use the heat vision to cut away the webs, but apparently Superman just burned a man to death. Yes, thank you for the advice about 5 minutes after I needed it. The charred corpse of your friend is very appreciative. Oh, come on, sissy pants, I killed all the robots, just go! What the hell did I fail the level for? Oh, there was a robot above the dude that I couldn't see because the camera sucks. Yeah, the game's camera doesn't show you anything above or below you, and it can't phase through walls or zoom in behind you or swivel to an overhead view. So anytime that you walk into a corner or a little side room, the camera opts to sit in place staring headlong at a wall to where you can't see what you're doing. But without the screwed up camera, I wouldn't have noticed that using Superman's powers in midair has him animated like he's standing on solid ground. Devs probably hoped you wouldn't notice with his legs always off screen. And without the buggy camera, I also wouldn't have noticed this moment where Superman's cape phases through to his chest. Or maybe I would, because it happened again about 5 minutes later. There's a second mine level where you have to save Jimmy Olsen, who's here for some reason. You find out the workers excavated a big-ass kryptonite meteor, and there's a quick puzzle where you can activate a radiation shield for 10 seconds at a time. I get that Lex Luthor is a bastard, but you'd think he'd do a better job trying to keep alive the people that get his kryptonite. This right here is why the dude has cancer! Oh, sorry. Justice League censored it to blood poisoning. My bad. When you find him, you're given 2 minutes to save Jimmy, but there's a slight problem. He won't let you rescue him until you've killed all 3 enemies around him, and 2 of said enemies are robots with kryptonite bullets that fling you down into a pit of lava. Oh, the lava doesn't actually hurt you, mind you. You figure out the rules to where punches kill you, but lava is just a soothing spa day. The poisoning just eats up shitloads of your time waiting for it to wear off. And the heat vision being blocked by invisible barriers around walls due to crappy collision doesn't help either. Okay, I need to get creative to kill these enemies. Let's try heat visioning them before entering the room so that the clock doesn't start. Oh, sorry, Jimmy. I was aiming for the thing behind you. Sorry, the aiming here isn't so great. I started to think the enemies haven't spawned in yet. Oh, you think? I saved Jimmy, but I don't have time to kill the robots on the way out, so I just have to try and dodge all the bullets mid-flight. Because Superman gives a shit whether or not Jimmy Olsen gets shot. Zach! Having not put it together yet that the game's cutscenes were never finished, I'd hoped that the big-ass kryptonite meteor might signal the beginning of some kind of story, but no such luck. Next, we're in the subway saving more hostages and... Perry White? The editor of the Daily Planet? Kind of an odd choice, but it is kind of funny that they replaced Professor Hamilton as the third friend that you need to save. Superman must have run ahead to Justice League Unlimited and found out he's a filthy traitor! This level sucks! You're going down an endless series of copy-pasted hallways rescuing people. Several of the people you need are hidden down forks or fake walls that it's easy to miss, and several of the civilians need medkits, which are hidden all over creation, sometimes miles away from the person that needs them. And Perry needs a special kind of medkit that's near the exit, which at least he's nice enough to tell you where it is. Come to find out, I couldn't find any of the medkits because most of them are hidden behind soda machines. Pepsi Man, you rat bastard! How could you betray me like this? And God help you if Perry gets shot as you tow him through half the stage to the exit, forcing you to redo all this crap. What's worse is that, unlike the first level, the civilians don't call for help anymore. You get no hints as to where these people are in a samey maze of fake walls. Guess that's what I get for complaining about the mouthy civilians in Shadow of Apocalypse I would kill for shouts of, "Can you help, Superman? Superman, can you help?" And yeah, the slow and tedious nature of the level isn't helped by your toe-curlingly slow movement speed. And I made a bit of a discovery on that. If you sit on the main menu long enough, the game starts running demos, and in all of the demos, Superman runs much faster than he does in the actual game. So, what the hell? I don't think it's an emulation problem. This ran the same on Schnick's Steam Deck. Is there a run button that I'm missing? Does the PAP 1's lack of analog controls screw with how the game's supposed to work? They didn't speed up the footage because the timer from the space level isn't ticking down any faster. My best guess is that this is from an earlier build where movement was faster, but the turning was so sensitive that it made the game near uncontrollable, so they had to slow everything down. If it turns out that you can run and I just missed it, I'm going to be mad! The subway level took me 40 minutes of backtracking across the whole stage, something like 8 times, before I finally found the last medkit that I needed to finish. It was tucked in a corner behind another soda machine, because your greatest nemesis isn't Brainiac or Lex Luthor, it's Pepsi Man! Then comes the boss fight with Parasite. I wasn't sure how to beat Parasite at first. There's a kryptonite laser in the corner that's near impossible to dodge, and Parasite can heal from a console in the corner anytime that he wants. It was a tough nut to crack, but I eventually stumbled across a masterful meta strategy. Stand perfectly still, punching Parasite in the face while he doesn't move. This works even if you're poisoned and dying. I should stress again that this is only a prototype of an unreleased game, but damn! Maybe he can't run because his nards are still hurt. Next up is the dam, where you have to save more people, but also stop some bombs. Most of this level is underwater, and every time you go in the water, Superman spontaneously changes into a diving suit with flippers and air tanks and goggles and, you know, shit that Superman doesn't need to swim! The first 2 hostages you have to save from robot fish. The game disables your ice breath and your heat vision underwater because Superman can't see underwater. Well, animated series Superman is considerably nerfed from the comics. Maybe he just can't use his... No, wait, animated series Superman could still do shit underwater just fine. Regardless, you need another way to fight the fish. You can try flying over and punching them out, but new ones spawn so quickly next to the hostages that you'll never make it. Maybe now is when the super speed charge comes in handy. Nope, because the super speed is the one thing in the game with a minuscule hitbox that never hits anything. Your best option is just to stand next to the civilian, punching the fish away when they go for the kill, only that barely worked for the second hostage because I guess I was too close to him to where our hitboxes were entangled and the game wouldn't let me punch! And if you think I'm blaming potential game bugs for myself being terrible, take it up with these wall textures that just disintegrated into black void! Take it up with the fact that apparently I'm a ghost now! It's like Superman doesn't have enough power, so he had to bum one from the Martian Manhunter. And then one of the hostages in this level refuses to be rescued because it's not safe, which is what they say if there are enemies nearby. Except I killed all the enemies. Is this another game bug, or is there an actual puzzle here? Eventually you reach a scientist who drops all the shields blocking different areas, but it also triggers a timer on the bombs, giving you 8 minutes to finish the level. Oh, there are new enemies in the room with that civilian. That must be why she didn't think all the enemies were dead yet. Okay, now we should be good. Fuck yourself, lady! Yeah, it turns out this is Lois. I just didn't recognize the generic ass character model. And you can't rescue her until you've rescued all the other hostages. Should be a cakewalk because I've just disabled the 3rd and final bomb. Now I can hunt for hostages at my... Why is the timer still running? The bombs are disabled. That clock is counting down to nothing. So you have to go back through the maze, try to remember where all the hostages and bombs are. One's hidden down an anonymous unmarked corner at the exit, and one's back at the level entrance. navigate several unavoidable long hallways that suck out your time, and then go all the way back to Lois at the exit, all on one timer. The next level is a fuel facility where you rescue more hostages and have to save Jimmy again. Cripes. This level's gimmick is that you have to use freeze breath to seal up leaking fuel tanks before you can save people, even though the textures don't change to show the hole's actually blocked off when you're done. Great job, Soups. That totally isn't going to explode mere seconds after you leave. After you rescue the first batch of workers, the rest of the paths through the level open up. One path leads to Jimmy and triggers a 2-minute clock to finish the stage. Problem is, Jimmy won't let you rescue him unless you've rescued all the other workers first, but it's too late, bitch! That timer's already running, and you can't stop it! You accidentally played the level out of order, and now it's unwinnable! And then you have to carry Jimmy through so many newly spawned robots that the game chugs to an exit that you probably don't know where it is. And then all of a sudden we're in space, fighting Lex Luthor in a robot suit, and having to save Lois again? Sure would love to see the cutscene explaining how the hell we got here! The Lexoskel is hands down the worst boss in the game. He can shoot you with kryptonite from anywhere, which forces you to the ground, and then if he steps on you while you're poisoned, it's a one-hit kill. It doesn't sound that difficult to deal with, but this thing's got a hitbox the size of China! You moved in to punch the boss, and you'll get caught up on invisible barriers around him to where you get stuck and you can't maneuver away from him. And the rat bastard can stomp the ground like 10 feet away from you, and it still counts as a hit. So you can just get stuck and die at a moment's notice and have to start the boss over, and he's got a lot of health. I ain't too proud to beg. I used save states to inch my way through the boss because he's a cheating bastard. I think this is the one point all game that the super speed charge comes in handy to land a hit and then get out of dodge. At least you can heal the poisoning by just walking up a ramp because Lex is too dumb to follow or shoot at you. He just prances back and forth until you come back to finish the fight. I think I'll talk to my analyst. I got it so bad for this little journalist. You'd think that, since we're already in space and all, we'd go dump on Brainiac's lawn next, but instead the game sends you to Lex's corporate headquarters to fight Mr. Mixia-Spitlick, a comic relief villain voiced by Gilbert Gottfried in the animated series, who can warp reality to his whim. This level has you saving people from oversized office furniture and upside-down rooms. It's covered in wily coyote-style walls painted to look like hallways, and there are funny puzzles like punching out paintings of eyes so that they stop staring at the hostages and freaking them out. It's a charming and creative level, and a prime example of how the level design is at least varied enough to keep the repetitive objectives from getting boring. Mixia-Spitlick did outwit me on one part, though. There are 2 hostages behind barriers that I couldn't figure out how to reach. They're glass. You just punch them, doofus. And then you fight Mixia-Spitlick by flying around activating signs to spell his name backwards and send him home, which normally he has to say or spell his own name backwards, but whatever. Mixia-Spitlick barely does anything. This fight is more a pop quiz on the crappy tank controls with a fixed camera. I think even he wants out of this game. Durr. The next level is Brainiac Spaceship, where you have to run around rescuing hostages again. Only this time the level's a maze of teleporters with a 15-minute time limit, and you need air tanks to rescue most of the astronauts. It feels like the game's barely evolved since the first frickin' level. Oh, but we got 2 different kinds of keys, since now you need repair kits to operate consoles, and some rooms have enemies that respawn infinitely. Yay. The spaceship does have a kinda clever screw you mechanic, though. There are several points where you need to punch open walls to find prisoners and items, but if you don't X-ray vision the walls first, you can punch a hole in the ship, which drastically cuts down your time. And given the insane amount of backtracking you need to do juggling air tanks, repair kits, and keys, letting you keep playing at this point is a practical joke. Superman's spacesuit doesn't have pockets to carry more than 1 item at once either, apparently. Past that, it's a pretty straightforward level, aside from this room where you have to figure out the 2 giant lightning things are generators that you can destroy by repeatedly punching some anonymous panels. But I figured it out pretty quickly, and I'm told that I suck at video games, so there you go.
In short time, your fate will be sealed, Superman.
Then you fight Brainiac, who just kind of stands there with two goons spawned above him at all times. If you punch him, he disappears having taken no damage, and you have to kill some minions to make him come back. I was confused as hell wondering how you hurt him and started flying around looking for puzzle elements, because it would be on brand for you to have to blow up Brainiac's stuff instead of attacking him directly. No, I was way overthinking it. After a few rounds, Brainiac loses his shield, and then you can punch him to death. And he's pretty cool with it, too. He just stands there playing with his ball while you beat him senseless. As long as you remember to run around to cure the poisoning before you run out of health, the dude does nothing to actively fight you. Still, at least this Brainiac moves, which puts him above the Nintendo 64 fight where he just stood there. And you only have to fight this Brainiac once, which puts him above the shit that DC's putting out these days! Once you beat Brainiac, you get a cutscene of the Daily Planet proclaiming that Metropolis is saved again, and Superman flies past his cheering friends and into the sunset. Gotta say, huge step up from Lex Luthor laughing in your face! That ending is kind of like the game itself. It's not good, but it's better than its predecessor. Superman on the PlayStation, or at least this prototype of the game, is not great. I can excuse the collision detection that makes a few bosses into migraines since it was a prototype, but the core gameplay is just clunky. Running down endless hallways looking for hostages and keys and medkits to give to hostages to get keys, with stiff and slow controls and combat that's just kind of obligatory. The damage mechanic was a neat idea, but it's unbalanced. Most of the time, damage is less a direct hazard to you, and more an annoyance as you need to wait for your powers to come back so you can continue playing. And between weak flying and the muted effectiveness of your powers, it doesn't do a great job of making you feel like Superman. But on the other hand, the levels have enough gimmicks to where the game doesn't feel repetitive, and a few of the stages are legitimately creative, and it is leaps and bounds better than the Nintendo 64 version by sheer virtue of being a game and not a torture device. It's not some great lost gem, but it is an interesting piece of gaming history as a footnote to its infamous cousin. And where Titus is concerned, that's about as good as you're ever gonna get.